Hey everyone, it's Brad and Josh here, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn, the ultimate film and TV podcast.
On today's episode, we're going to be reviewing Blumhouse's new film Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and the Netflix comedy drama Jay Kelly.
A live-action film based on the popular game series Helldivers is in the works at Sony, and of course Sony has the game rights to them and stuff. You got Justin Lin, who's directed some of the Fast and Furious films, along with many other things, is going to direct, along with Gary Dauberman, who wrote Annabelle, is going to write the script for it. Now, this is a game series that could be really fun as a film. Like, if you haven't ever played, especially the second one, Helldivers 2 really gave a big boost to this series. It is a very tongue-in-cheek, spreading democracy across the galaxy, very much inspired by the Starship Troopers film. Not as much with the book. You can get a little bit of the book, but the book is much different than the film. The film got that definitely government propaganda, over the top, tongue-in-cheek, and if we don't see a salute happen in that movie, like something is wrong in it. But this could be really fun if they get the humor mixed with the action, right? Like, it's gotta be sarcastic, it's gotta be poking fun at the government and the military and the dedication and everything they try to say. Like, there's plenty of lore in Helldivers 2, but the main thing you got to focus on is give us good, fun, over-the-top action, because you've got atomic bombs being strapped to people's backs and blown up, and you get that over-the-top action with that just Starship Troopers like humor, and it could be a really big hit.
Yeah, it's got the potential for that. The games are an absolute blast. I love playing Helldivers. That's a fun game. I haven't played it in a minute, but it's one of those that you definitely have a certain aesthetic to the game and the thing, and you got to incorporate all the different enemies you have to fight in that game, which are very much Starship Trooper-esque bugs, and then you've got the robots, and you've got
kind of like Terminator-like robots.
Kind of, yeah. And so you got inspiration you could draw from several things that you could really have a lot of fun and kind of poke around with. Justin Lin's a pretty decent director, given his track record of Fast and Furious films, so he knows how to make these kind of over the top, not taking itself too seriously, kind of action style films. But getting Justin Lin in this is not without its own controversies, because he's admitted he's not a gamer by any means, and he's never played the series. So there's naturally some concern that comes with that, where you don't really need to. But I kind of think it might help not having been too deep into the lore to kind of take the reins on it and have a little bit of fun with it and not take it super seriously, which is what I'm hoping is the case here. But there's definitely some concern about him not really knowing the lore of the movies. But when you're dealing with directors, how much into video game lore are you expecting these guys to be if you want to sacrifice that for a quality of film that you might wind up getting? I don't know. That's a different discussion for a different time.
Yeah, this is one where I feel like you may not have to be a video game player, because it is such a, you're dropping in, you're doing missions, and there is lore that happens with the major orders and everything else going around. But like I said, there's key things, just over-the-top action and that government propaganda humor that you've got to nail. And as long as you know those two things, I think they can do well. I don't think the story as is important with something like this. You still need to kind of do it right, because you are dealing with different enemy groups. You've got, as you said, you've got the robot type of enemies, you've got the insect type of enemies, and then you have those kind of more ethereal type of enemies that you have, because like you said, we said there's Star Wars influences and Destiny, the long game running game series. There's so many different inspirations they have that it almost becomes like too big of a mess if you try to look into all the different parodies and things that it kind of touches at. So you just kind of get that core. Like, you got to drop down in the pods, you've got to call stuff in, like you have mechs you can do, you have over the top explosions and everything else that can be done. It needs to be high, insane, over the top action with that just gritty, tongue-in-cheek political humor, and they're going to have a winner. So I think this one may not be as important that the director is not that familiar with playing the game. You still want them to kind of make sure they get it right. But hopefully you got the studio and others that are really giving them the tips and the pointers, especially, going to the writer and the director and making sure, hey, this is what we try to accomplish. This is what we tried to do with the story. This is how this and that and everything else is. And you should have a fun film out of it.
I can imagine they'll do their research a little bit. I mean, you're signing on to make a project like this. You don't go into things thinking I'm going to make a piece of trash film. You know, like they're gonna do the research, but we'll see. You definitely have to have your for democracy moments in there, and like that tongue in cheek stuff that you're saying to make that film successful and as true to a video game as you can. I mean, you can take some inspiration for some recent successful properties that have done that. I think making it in kind of a Fallout-esque style as well could be fun, like as well as Fallout has done. I know we're coming up on season 2 of that eventually that I'm really excited for. But yeah, making it something along those lines, looking to that, even something like that for inspiration would probably work wonders for this. And you got to imagine it's going to be a violent, crazy, over the top, hopefully rated R film that you can.
It should be, yeah.
As crazy as the game is, it's going to kind of have to be. So we'll see what comes out of it.
Yeah, the rated R rating is so weird because if it's creatures and you don't give them red blood, then they can get away with a lot more over the top violence without going rated R. They could be PG-13, but because they're killing robots and insects, I mean, you're going to have plenty of disposable soldiers that get killed in there and stuff. But it depends if they limit the amount of blood you see from that. But I have a feeling they probably got to go a pretty hard R with this to get the over the top. Because, I mean, just look at the opening cinematic to Helldivers 2 where this guy is just talking and then his family gets brutally murdered by a bug. Like, it doesn't shy away from the violence. So, I mean, there's two different ways it could go with it. Like you said, if they try to limit showing the amount of blood, because you're very heavily armored. But if you've played any match, you come back to the screen to tell you what you did, and my character has just been drenched from head to toe in red blood and like can barely even see the colors of my armor. So they could try to limit it, but it definitely feels like they need to go rated R with this.
They definitely have to go in on all that to be successful for sure. But I want to move us into our next story now, and we're both big avid fans of the show The Bear. The Bear is absolutely brilliant. Go back in our archives and see what we thought of the most recent season, but it's been revealed by Jeremy Allen White now that season 5 is going to start filming in January, which is great news. And there may not be solid plans yet set in stone for anything beyond season 5, but he wasn't really willing to dive in and say this is going to be the definitive last season. Now, obviously, we need some follow-up on the way they left things at the end of season 4, so happy for season 5. Happy that they're filming it and happy that it's coming probably, I would assume, in 2027 if they're filming in 2026, but you never know because they can turn it around very quick. They can turn it around very quickly, so hopefully we get it significantly sooner, but you see where everything else goes. It can film 1 year and come out 2 years later, or in some Marvel properties cases, like 3, 4, 5 years later. We're looking at you, Ironheart. But like we could hopefully get it sooner than later. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see where they take this story, and I'm glad they're finally diving back into it and revisiting it because the show is just absolutely fantastic, and I'm excited that we're getting another follow-on season.
Yeah, I think the plan still is for like a June, July release of next year. It doesn't take like too terribly long to edit and do. So they're able to film in like January, February and get it out for maybe a late summer, maybe if it takes a little bit longer than that. But we don't know how many episodes it's going to be. We don't know. And if this does end up being the final season, does it need a little bit more time to do stuff? And it has felt like it's moving towards the end, especially with what happened in season 4. You had a lot of drama, a lot of shifting, and a lot of things happening here. Like, it definitely feels like it's going towards that, and you don't want it to stick around too long and overstay its welcome and just kind of end up being bad. Like it was, my wife finally started watching The Bear, and I actually sat in and watched the wedding episode from season 4 with her, because once they started going under that table, I just started giggling, and my wife's like, what do you, just wait for the world's longest wedding table that can fit so many people underneath it. But yeah, it's been such a solid and great series. I'm going to be sad to see it go.
Sure, for sure.
But it definitely set up that it's heading towards the end. And he even said that season 4 was originally going to be the end of it until it was like Christmas Eve last year that he got called up and said, hey, we're doing another season. So we're not quite to Christmas. Yeah, we're getting close. So if they stick to that standard, they'll probably know in late December here if what they're about to film in January is going to be it or not.
Yeah, it does seem like it's reaching its natural conclusion for this story because you have the very uncertain financial future of the Bear at, the restaurant, like what's coming up. Because obviously when you get to the end of the season, the clock strikes 0 and you wonder what's coming next, right? So you have to imagine there's going to be some kind of definitive end to this at some point. You would feel naturally, the way they've been telling the story, that season 5 would be the way to do it. I'm also in the same boat with you, where I don't want it to drag itself out too long, where you try to get a little too greedy and go maybe an extra season too long, and then you get what could potentially be 2 back-to-back subpar seasons that kind of drag out a story longer than it needs to, just because you want to make a little extra money. But I feel like this 5th season should be the natural wrap-up to the way the story is progressing. I'm personally hoping that's the case, just from a quality storytelling standpoint. As popular as it is, it wouldn't surprise me to try to see them stretch it out, but hopefully they don't. Hopefully they follow that natural progression, and the show can end the way it needs to, in my opinion, to have a really solid end and be the best version of this total story, because up to now it's been just brilliant and fantastic and well done. The actors are all incredible. The writing's amazing, and I'm really hoping that they put their foot down and say, hey, this is it. We're done with this. We're not going beyond this, because this is where the story has to end, and I would be so happy if that's the case.
And we've talked about it before, that the season like 5, 6, 7, in that range of a lot of TV shows is kind of where they either wrap it up in a good way or it jumps the shark, that they kind of built to a conclusion, but then the studio's not ready to be done with it, and the showrunners aren't ready to be done with it, so it gets stretched 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more seasons or something like that, or 3 or 4. But it's that 5 through 7 season that really kind of makes or breaks a lot of series that have been long running, because you get to that point, like you feel like you've done everything, and that's when you have big shifts in tone, or you have big shifts in story, where a lot of things can go downhill. So it's
Correct.
You're still building really well. Yeah, if that's it, where we left season 4, season 5 feels natural to be the end. Like, I love it. It's been a fantastic show. I'm glad. I think I caught onto it around season 2.
Yeah.
And then introduced you to it and everything else. But it's been such a fantastic show. And rightfully so. You have so many of the actors in here have really started upping their film careers out of it. So you've also got that aspect of it, is that they're all going off and doing so many other big things. You've got one of them join the MCU. Jeremy Allen White has a small Star Wars role coming up in Mandalorian Grogu. So, and just have so many of them are just exploding on the scene right now. It's natural for that too, as we saw with Steve Carell with The Office. It comes to a point like, all right, my movie career is skyrocketing, take it off. It's time to go. End it all at one time, instead of having someone exit and then try to leave. That's my biggest worry, which so far they haven't shown that they're going to do something that just doesn't feel right, is that they keep it going, but you're going to lose maybe half your cast because they decided to take it in a new direction.
Definitely don't want it to end like that. That's not the best way for this show to end. Needs to end definitively. Follow the Breaking Bad example. 5 seasons is a really solid pocket of time to tell your story in. Wrap it up, get it done. Give us one last amazing season, and we can remember this show fondly for all eternity at that point. Hopefully that's the case, because you find that real sweet spot, and you can land. If you can stick the landing in the end of your story, you'll be remembered forever. Or you end up going 1 or 2 seasons too far, and you become like Game of Thrones, which I hate continuously using that as an example, because it's still legitimately one of my favorite shows ever, but notorious for a very bad ending and a really weak finish. So don't put yourself in that situation, because it's so popular you can't imagine trying to squeeze a couple extra pennies while you're sacrificing good creative storytelling in the process. So I hope that's not the case.
And one story that we've been waiting for so long to be done and ready is the Batman Part 2. Feels like Matt Reeves has been working on it for 15 years now. It's been quite a long time, but he's wanted to perfect it. He's wanted to get this story right. We've had Colin Farrell talking greatly about what it looks like, calling it brilliant, and that he is really ready to get back into that world. But we got a few announcements of things coming for the Batman Part 2, because they're ramping up to finally start filming early next year. I think around April of next year is when it's supposed to start. But it seems like Zoe Kravitz, Catwoman, is not going to be returning for the Batman Part 2. We don't know if maybe she'll get a little nod or something here. It makes sense because of how they left it, but you always hate, especially when you're trying to establish a big world and it's been so long between the first two, that you take a character that you did well with, but there's, of course, so much more that you can do with Selena Kyle and Catwoman's character that she may not appear at all in here. But, and it's maybe not as related to it, but Scarlett Johansson is in talks to join the cast. So apparently Emma Stone was first offered this role. She turned it down, and Scarlett Johansson sent her team after it. It's going to be really interesting to see what she does in DC. She's like the real biggest first name from the MCU, of course, you know, where her status stands in the MCU right now, but she's one of the first big names of the main cast to join the DCU, or join DC.
Right, and you still don't know what she's going to do. We have our theories. People tend to start the rumor mill automatically when you hear a name that big, like, oh, what role do they have for her? Is she going to play a big role? Or is she going to play a minor role? Like, there's talks of her doing everything from being potentially Mr. Freeze's wife, which is a very minor bit part in it based on the overall story, but they could dive a little bit more into that, into her backstory here to create that, because you and I both talk and we think that Mr. Freeze would be amazing in a darker setting.
Incredible in this world. Give
us something better than that god-awful Arnold Schwarzenegger performance from Batman and Robin, but there's also talk of her playing Andrea Beaumont, which is one of my favorite characters in any Batman property we've gotten. I have a poster of Mask of the Phantasm in my music room. It's one of my favorite animated films ever. It's very in love with how much I love Batman the Animated Series. It was the movie they made. Mask of the Phantasm is absolutely brilliant, and it would be really cool if she got to play that role as well, because they could have a lot of fun in that kind of darker setting too, going with the Phantasm route and kind of the supernatural elements and stuff with that if they really wanted to. So a lot of meat on the bone here for whatever they're going to decide to do with the second film, that it feels like we've been waiting 875 years for this film to come out. It feels like it was like the first film ever made now. We've gotten so much since then, but yeah, I'm excited to see them dive back in and see what they do here.
Yeah, and a live-action Mask of the Phantasm would be pretty incredible. I don't know if that storyline fully fits in with where the Batman left off, because he's still supposed to be younger, and we know that, you know, Andrea Beaumont was an ex of Bruce's, and it's supposed to be a little bit older in that storyline and stuff. But yeah, we went to the anniversary screening of what they did, a 4K restoration of it, and we went to theaters to watch Mask of the Phantasm, which was great. That would be fantastic. But there's so many strong, good women in the Batman universe, villains and heroes and all that. You really don't know who could she potentially be in that, because you could throw out, and they could recast so many different things. You think maybe Barbara Gordon, but you know, wondering how that would play in with what they've set up with Jim Gordon and that, and the actors, you know, differences in there. And you also have Harley Quinn. I couldn't see them doing an older Harley Quinn with Scarlett. I mean, there's only like a 2-year difference between Robert Pattinson and Scarlett, even though they're supposed to be, you know, Robert's supposed to be playing a younger, you know, Batman, but he's about to turn 40 himself in there. So it's really interesting to see how they pick that up and like how long it's supposed to be, because what was a Penguin just a couple weeks after the Batman, and I don't think this is supposed to be very long after the Batman Part 1. So it is really going to be interesting to see where they go. Yeah, as you mentioned, I would love to see a darker, more dramatic Mr. Freeze done, but there's been rumors of Hush and the Court of Owls and all that, and they're keeping the story under wraps, but I'm really curious to see just who they get, because we know in the not main DCU that the Batman is supposed to be remaining in, we also have the Clayface movie coming out. So you doubt that they're going to do anything that's related to that unless there's a wink and a nod or something to it. You have James Gunn developing The Brave and the Bold, but you don't know exactly how that's going to fit in and work in. And you know those Batman are going to be separate, but you got to be looking. Like, you can't have a villain or characters in the Batman that you're also going to use in The Brave and the Bold in a different way, because it's just going to feel like, okay, we just retreaded and redid what Matt Reeves did, because, you know, the Batman Part 2 is going to be out before the first DC, you know, James Gunn's DC Batman comes out. So you got to know that there's been a lot of talking and trying to figure out what's in there. I just hope he wasn't like handicapped at all on what he could do or use when it came to the Batman, because, of course, he started that before James Gunn took over, and they're still trying to continue it on its own. But we also got fans clamoring to bring Robert Pattinson into the DC universe as Batman and not have it separate. But you've also now got, with the story we're about to talk about, Netflix potentially buying and being the rights owner to DC from the Warner Brothers merger. You've got fans calling for Henry Cavill to come back as Superman and kind of reset the DC, James Gunn DC universe.
Yeah, and there's a lot of balls in the air. Like I've been very vocal in my desire to have a live action Hush version in there. That would be incredible too. But we'll see what happens with the Batman Part 2. I'm excited to see that it's finally getting close to being started to production, and we'll start to have a little more clarity in 2026 as far as what they're going to do with that. But let's go ahead and just rip the Band-Aid off here and get to our last story before we get to our reviews. And we have to talk about the gigantic $82.7 billion elephant in the room, which is Netflix announcing that they're purchasing Warner Brothers officially. And, we've talked ad nauseum so much about these companies pulling their resources together and just creating this big conglomeration of what's that going to look like. Well, this is about as big a one as you can talk about when you have Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. And that includes all of their properties, with maybe the exception of Discovery that might break off and do its own thing. But you get Netflix now owning the rights to HBO, HBO Max, all of the catalog of the Warner Brothers film division, Warner Brothers gaming division, even. You're getting into some really deep, serious things, and you have to wonder where that's going to leave literally everything in an absolutely game-changing, entertainment-shifting deal that is going to be a big, hot mess.
Yeah, you feel like you want to just be done talking about it and let it see how it goes, but this is a monumental thing for the movie and TV industry, because Netflix has been the forefront of trying to change the industry, of that they feel theatrical releases are kind of outdated. And they kind of already touched on it a little bit here, that they're still going to have theatrical releases for the Warner Brothers properties, but they feel the current status and way that they do it is just not working. It's not what the consumer wants. Speaking for every single consumer, saying that they don't want a 45-day window in theaters. They want it at home where they can watch it right away and stuff. So you feel like maybe they're going to try to cut the theatrical window down from 1 to 2 weeks or something like that. We've seen them do the limited runs with K-pop, and we got the Stranger Things finale, and you have, was it Red One got a small, but I think that was most of them are either 1 week or 2 weeks. They're not giving a whole lot to theater, so this is a big concern for a lot. We have the Directors Guild and the Writers Guild and Teamsters, and a lot of them speaking out about it because they don't know what this means for directors, for the theaters. This could be really damaging to those like us who love to go to the theaters, because you're talking about the DC universe, which how big comic books has, even though it's kind of fallen off a little bit lately. But you've got the Harry Potter series, whether they stick to keeping the TV series that just started, just started filming, or they go back to wanting to reboot that into films and putting those on Netflix instead of going out. And, it's also disruptive because they don't want all of the channels, all the networks that they have. They're just kind of basically taking the properties they want, and we have no idea where the rest of it lies.
Yeah, it's a gigantic mess, and it's still got to sort itself out. There's still a lot of legal things that they have to clear through. Some of this stuff's not going to be final until late next year. There's a whole big mess of stuff that's coming out of it, and it's a little disheartening because of a couple things. It's an interesting financial study, how Netflix has this much capital to invest in a company like that. If you're trying to kill the theatrical nature of these films, where are you making enough money to recoup these things if you're investing? And this is where I start to worry, how are you going to be investing into your films to make any kind of money? Because you hear about some of these massive losses that they've taken on things that are 300, couple $100 million was put into this project and it was only released on Netflix. How did you recoup any of that money? And now you're going to have your hands on so many IPs. It kind of makes you wonder, like, yeah, okay, there's a large chunk of people that are willing to wait until a film comes out on streaming to watch it, if it's not one they want to rush out. But you still see so many instances of films being successful in the theaters because people still value that experience.
There's Utopia 2, the biggest example of just how globally it has just been killing it in the box office.
Yeah, like for stuff like that, it's going to there's still an audience for those types of things, and you're trying to kill that off completely. You're really just cutting off a revenue source for you. Like this it makes zero sense for me, but we're not the ones looking at the particular financials. Apparently somehow they've gotten a couple $100 billion to, be able to feel comfortable throwing 82 of it towards this deal, and you're just wondering where all of it's going to wind up, because the way that it makes it sound like some of the info that's come out of it is they're not going to completely shutter HBO Max right away. It's still going to be around for a while, but it does open the possibility of them having those properties on your service. And I'm guessing the business thinking is, well, if I got HBO Max for something like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, if I can get that on Netflix now instead of having to pay for HBO Max, I'm just going to cancel HBO Max and go with Netflix, because that's where all the properties are that I want to watch. And I'm sure that's what their line of thinking is, but at the same time, like, what are we doing? Where are we winding up with all of this? And it's so disheartening. Like you said, this is going to affect so many people in an already stretched thin entertainment industry where so many people are struggling to find any type of consistent work. You're limiting that even more. There's less opportunities for people to work, potentially. Well, you know what happens with these mergers. They put their people in places and they lay off a bunch of other people. Like, it's what happens when you have these corporate takeovers all the time. And that's disheartening for so many people. And it's just like, where are they going to work? What are they going to do? Like, what's going to come out of this? How are we going to get on the other side of it positively for everybody? I don't know. The jury's still out on that.
Yeah, not even with film, but the TV side of the properties that they're going to be bringing over about their production, because it is pretty well known that Netflix hasn't given that many series very long runs. Most of them are 3 to 5 seasons if they get that before they're done. Like most of them, even like our beloved Netflix Marvel series, got 2 to 3 seasons and that was it. And we got Stranger Things ending with 5, even that does feel a little more naturally ending instead of being forced to go out. But it's going to be a huge shakeup. But you've also got on the other side, Paramount and Skydance merged just last year or earlier this year, and they have been extremely aggressive about wanting all the Warner Brothers properties, and they want everything. They want the networks, they want all that, but they're owned by one of the richest families in the world, and you worry and you struggle about what that would mean if they got in. And they're even announced that they're trying for a hostile takeover. They're not taking, Netflix being chosen as the winner to get an exclusive deal laying down. They want to do a hostile takeover, which is kind of going to the stakeholders, offering this and trying to kind of go behind the back of the deal and get something done. But it's kind of which is the lesser of the two evils, because you have a huge, gigantic network now of Paramount and everything they own. Them owning Warner Brothers would feel like to be an antitrust type of issue, but Netflix as well owning Warner Brothers feels like it falls in that same, like one is potentially trying to kill the theatrical experience, but the other side is killing a lot of stuff. Since they've owned Paramount, they're canceling a lot of movies and projects. They're just, and it feels like too aggressively going after this. Like, I get if you want some properties, but they're writing letters to congressmen and they're talking about hostile takeovers, and they're just saying a lot of stuff that just feels like it's, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to take it, whether you like it or not. And it just feels like a humongous mess that is really going to have either way. If Paramount somehow is able to do the hostile takeover something, it feels like something that's going to really reshape and change the industry, because we saw kind of what happened when Disney bought Fox, of how much of Fox's film production and stuff like that it's 25% of it what it used to be. What happens with Paramount takes over or with Netflix takes over, we're not going to get as many theatrical films when Netflix has, or you have it for a week or two. And at that point, as we saw with COVID, when you couldn't go to the theaters and they were instantly putting stuff out, it hurt a lot of films, and it hurt the business greatly. And it still really hasn't fully recovered from what COVID did. And Netflix is kind of trying to capitalize on that. Okay, well, theaters are still struggling. Let's just kind of kill them off. And you hate to, as much as we complain about people talking and the prices and everything else, we still love the theatrical experience. As much as you can have a great TV and sound system at home, there's still nothing that compares to going in a theater to see something, because 99% of us can never get a screen as big as that you can get a movie theater, or as nice of a sound system as you can get a movie theater. But this is one that's really, whichever way it goes, and it could be late 2026, even to 2027 before anything really ever happens. That's why it kind of made me just scratch my head a little bit that Netflix already announced it. They sent out an email, press releases, everything announcing they're buying them, but like, the Discovery stuff has to split off before this is done, and that's said to be Q3 of 2026. You have all the regulatory and antitrust and approvals that it has to go through. You're almost 2 years away, almost 1 to 2 years away before this could potentially ever even be done, and you're already announcing it like, hey, yeah, we got this all. It's weird. I know we've talked about it a ton, but this is something that could really reshape the entertainment industry.
It's a big deal, and it's very unfortunate because, like you said, we're all for people having work and people doing things, and also we, obviously being fans of film, we want to protect that film going experience as well. And who knows how it's all going to shake out, but hopefully they reach some kind of resolution, and hopefully smarter heads prevail when all is said and done. But it's still a very messy process that they have to get through to get this across the finish line. So we'll see what happens. We got a little bit of ways before anything could be officially official and formal, but we'll see where it all shakes out.
We are now partnered with Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink to give you focus with no crash or jitters like other energy drinks.
Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It also features 0 calories, no sugar, no fillers, and no artificial dyes.
From Dragonade and S'mores to Push and Punch and Galaxy Grenade, Dubby has a wide range of flavors for you to choose from.
Use code WBTP to save 10% off your Dubby Energy orders, and look for a direct link in the audio and video descriptions.
Five Nights at Freddy's 2 picks up about a year after the events of the first one. So if you didn't really watch the first one, there's this pizza chain that's very much Chuck E. Cheese, but, not Chuck E. Cheese, that had a lot of tragedies happen, a lot of kids disappearing and being murdered and things found, and the owner of it all being wrapped up in a lot of controversy. And you have these animatronics that, performed on stage there end up coming to life and killing people and causing a lot of chaos. And, we pick up after the events of the first one, where we've got, Mike and Abby are still trying to deal with life kind of after Freddy's at the end of the last one, where you got reveal of William Afton was behind everything, seemingly killed off because the suit kind of latched into him and kind of took him over, but we didn't really fully see where his body went. You have his daughter, Vanessa, who's still trying to deal with the trauma of everything that her dad had put her through, and, trying to have a life potentially with Mike and Abby and dealing with all the horrors and everything else. But I gotta say, I was hopeful from the trailers that this was going to turn out to be a fun, better horror movie. The first one very much went more of trying to do the lore and going into the darkness of these animatronics. And there's going to be slight spoilers if you don't know stuff about this world and universe that we kind of got to talk about to get into more of the sequel here. But it really revolves around the bodies, the souls, the spirits of these murdered children are possessing these animatronics, and they're doing the bidding of someone. The first one, it's William Afton, and this one you've got a little bit something different, because we're going back and we're finding out about Scarlett, a young girl who, was obsessed with this marionette puppet from the original Five Nights at Freddy's location that never appeared anywhere else. And, she ends up being kind of, I think, the first kid who died at Freddy's. And it kind of tries to go through that lore and that story. But I really feel like they dropped the ball on giving us a really fun sequel. Like, I think Five Nights at Freddy fans might get more enjoyment out of the general audience in this, but there's a lot of issues.
Yeah, this film's not without its problems, right? And I want to preface before I go into anything that I talk about from this from a film perspective. I like the games. I love the Five Nights at Freddy's games. They're a ton of fun. They're like this game franchise that had no business by aesthetic wise being as successful as it was, found like this really huge grassroots movement popularity from a fan base that really grew over the years. And there's several games in the franchise. There's a ton of lore to dive into. And I gotta say, the one thing that I will give this film credit for is a lot of fan service and paying respect to people who play the games and know the lore and are really into, the lore of the games and, everything like that. There's a ton of fan service in this film, but it's fan service in lieu of a cohesive plot and any type of good storytelling. I will say the dialogue in this film is ridiculous. Terrible dialogue in this film. The dialogue is not good. The plot is not good as well. I think we were kind of a little bit sold a bill of goods on it. You put one of the more prominent younger actresses in your trailer in McKenna Grace, making it seem like she was going to have a little bit of a bigger role in this film than she did. And I think she's in it maybe a total of 5 to 10 minutes, if that.
That was really disappointing.
As far as like that goes. So I was definitely disappointed in that. This film, though, does lean into more of the jump scare element, which is more prevalent in the games if you play the games. The games are very dependent on jump scares. One thing I did appreciate that they did in this film was one particular scene where you get Josh Hutcherson in the security office, almost kind of going through like you're playing the actual game itself, right? And just like if you've played the game, you know how you have to, click certain things and look through certain things and activate and shut doors and turn off fence and all that stuff. And I think they did a fine job of that in that scene in particular, but the rest of this film, I gotta say, just was not it for me at all. Like, And like I said, this is coming from somebody who liked the games. I just thought the film was just not good. It just wasn't a good movie. Like, they do some fine things with like the jump scare elements of it, incorporating the aesthetics of the games into the movie. I think they did an okay job at that, but that's kind of where the good stops for this film for me.
Yeah, I was trying to look at it from two angles, from, knowing the game series and knowing that it's a campier, sillier, over-the-top game with a lot of jump scares, and it was made by one guy, but bravo to everything.
Amazing story.
That they were able to do, and they've changed, the game style up multiple times and stuff too, but yeah, they've developed a decent amount of lore, and at the core of Five Nights at Freddy's, there is a really solid horror series you could get out of it, that you've got this dark story of kids being murdered and their souls being put into animatronics and animatronics killing and stuff, and this one just felt like they were trying too hard to be a video game than a movie, because you get the general, like Vanessa knows everything, so she can give secret codes, and she does this, and she does that, and it's just, everything felt too convenient in this one as well. And you said the jump scares fit the series, like they're a staple of the games. But they're also felt a little lazy and predictable in here. Like I could feel and see every single one of them coming, and they had some creepiness to it. There's a few scenes that definitely had some decent creep factor to it. Yeah. But those jump scares did feel really lazy and predictable on that. And as you said, the dialogue was so rough and bad. My biggest disappointment, and it's really the hard thing that you're trying to do, is that most horror movies don't have a lot of character development. You're not really expecting that. But when this has gone so heavy into the lore with the first one, and it feels like it's going so heavy in the lore with the second one, there's no character development at all. Like, Abby is still the same kid she was in the first one, even though she had gone through something like seeing animatronics kill people and being trapped in something that should be terrifying. She's just still obsessed about getting back to her animatronic friends and all this stuff. And you get a little bit of the Mike that he's trying to process stuff to make a better life for Abby and trying to help Vanessa and stuff, but he's still very kind of one note. He's in the same place. Like I said, Abby's just running off and doing whatever she wants. And Vanessa, she's dealing with the scars and the damage that her dad has done, but really, like, none of them are like maybe 2% different than they were in the first one. Yeah. And I'd almost say it's the same way for the story. You're introducing Charlotte and stuff at the first location, but you're kind of going through the same beats that you did in the first movie as well. So it's a sequel that feels really too much like the original without much much difference in there. Like, they do some good fan service, as you said, of more feelings of the games and stuff, and some kind of funny jokes of, as you mentioned, with him going in the office to go through stuff and realizing there's no door and making jokes that there's not being a door. But it's so inconsistent with everything, especially with the animatronics. Like, I'll give it up to the Jim Henson Creature Company. They did a fantastic job with the animatronics. They looked and performed great. But you get them walking around the Five Nights at Freddy's first location very slow and everything else. But there's a good part of the film, and this is a slight spoiler on it, that they're able to escape outside of the confines of Freddy's, and somehow they can travel all around town in a blink of an eye. Yeah, but when you see them, they're just moving just really slow and tiny. And, you know, there can be speed ups in the game when they're coming to attack you and everything else, but it's like, you're here. Well, you just left 5 minutes ago from the creature, so you think you probably have a couple hours before they can catch up. Oh, nope, they're there.
Yeah, and they're able to move extremely quickly, almost at the speed of the Flash kind of thing. But it's just some of that stuff, that's that little tiny attention to detail that just really kind of pokes at your brain a little bit. That kind of irks me when they get to that point, and it just. Yeah, like, I agree with everything you say there, because it feels like they didn't progress anything. They really didn't. Like you said, Abby is still Abby, even though she had no growth from one to the next, because she's still super obsessed with these, and she's sad that she can't see her friends, but then she goes and defies everything to go see her friends and does all this stuff, and there's just very little movement. Mike's still low-key kind of a little bit of a jerk in it, but he's still trying his best, and you kind of want to root for him, and you kind of don't, you know. And then Vanessa, who, you know, is trying low-key to deal with some of the stuff from her family's past, but she can't really escape from it kind of thing, and she doesn't really grow in that sense, and they just leave things in this weird place. Like, you can see it's going to be a continuous franchise from Blumhouse here, where they very much leave it open for more continuation, more characters. There's more things, you know, put into the story that incorporate the game, which I guess is fine. But I mean, it like I said, fan service was good in this. I agree. The animatronics looked incredible in it. They were amazing, but the rest of the stuff for me, is somebody who likes film and likes character development and likes story progression and things like that, we're really left very unsatisfied by it. And that's where I try to disconnect between being a video game fan versus a film fan, where I like the fan service. I was like, oh, that's cool. There's that character that, you know, I remember that character from the games, and I remember how important this one is, and the marionette and stuff like that. That stuff was all good and well and done just fine. It's just the rest of it was just like, ugh. Like, we found ourselves laughing at some of the absurdity, you and I, like, when we went and saw it together, like, more times than I really wanted to out of this film. And that's not the theme that they were necessarily going for in the movies, where they have their little couple chuckle moments, but we were just laughing at more of the absurdly bad stuff than we were than anything else, which isn't the best sign for a film for us, because we just like put our head down and shook our heads sometimes. And it's,
I know you looked over me a few times, and I'm just like, and tilting my head to the side, and like, okay, they really just did that.
Yeah, and it's disappointing, because there was potential there to really. You had a good start with the first film. I felt like the first film was fine. The first film was not without its issues too, but you were hoping for more out of the follow-up, and I don't think we got enough of that there, where these characters really move forward anyway, because at the end of the day, Mike's still kind of a jerk, and he, you know, just the whole dynamic between him and Vanessa was just weird in this movie, and it ends in a weird place, and it sets up what I think they were hoping for was a cool element to go at the end. One thing I will give, and I kind of want to turn from that to one of the things I thought they did really well from a character perspective, was that creep factor with the Scarlett possession of other characters and stuff, and some of the visuals looked really good and really well done. I'm like, okay, that's super creepy. That was kind of cool, like when they possess a couple of the characters in the film, and they do a cool job of that. I won't go into any like super spoilery stuff. You can watch it when you see it, but I thought when they got to that point, those were really cool, and I'm like, yes, let's do some more of that and really dive into it. And then they really only do it for like not even like 30 to 40 seconds to a
Everything's
minute.
so quick.
It's just, it's just like, let's just cram a bunch of stuff in here and see what happens. And that was a little disappointing. I'm like, oh, you could have had a couple more minutes and done something really cool with that. And they just kind of missed the mark for me.
Yeah. You don't have to have a ton of depth and craziness to a horror film, especially if it's a horror video game series. But as I said and you've said, it just feels like they did the same thing they did in the first film and just added a few more jump scares and things like that. It just felt too similar. And we've said this game series has a lot of lore and a lot of darkness, and you could have gone in a really serious way, but also still have that campy humor and stuff to it. But it's just so disappointing for me. Like, Abby did not change in the slightest. She is still the same kid that was running off, doing whatever she wants to do, putting herself in the situations. You've also just got the ability that anybody can enter these restaurants. Like, you have murders of children that have happened in multiple locations, of mysterious deaths and other things happening in this franchises. The buildings are still up. They kind of explain why at least one of them had security. But that's also another huge flaw with this movie, is that they introduce another security guard for the original Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's supposed to play a big importance to the story and the role, but they're in there for 2 minutes. Yeah. There's nothing explained. There's nothing different other than just kind of rehashing things in a slightly different way. Like, it frustrated me that they added something else, but it was like, and we get the reveal towards the end, and it's like, wait, okay, but you did nothing with this.
Big whoop.
You did absolutely nothing with this. It's just it's a film full of frustrations, because there really is a solid, fun horror franchise in Five Nights at Freddy's that can be done. This felt lazy and just kind of like, as I said, it feels like they just kind of copied the first one over and made just a couple changes and went on. And as you said, McKenna Grace, you're hyping up that you've got this great starlet coming into this franchise to do stuff with, and barely did anything with her in that. And like I said, they did up the creep factor some. They did up the jump scares and stuff with that, but it just felt like so tacked on. And there's just so many kind of dumb decisions and mistakes. That there's one sequence with Vanessa in a car being attacked, and she gets away and moves into another seat, but then she sits there. Yeah. Instead of getting out of the car or doing something else, she just sits there. Because again, at least in this film franchise that they've set up, the animatronics move slow. So it'd be very easy to run away and get away from these things, but yet somehow they're always still getting trapped. Like, you needed to bring in more of that creep factor, that they can speed up to come after you, or they can do this or that. But it just feels like there are so many wrong decisions made all across. Like, the bones are there for something decent, and it's trying to look at it as, all right, it's a teen horror film. I can't want or expect too much out of a story or anything like that. But when they basically gave you the first film again, it's disappointing.
Yeah, with a little fun flair thrown in from the actual games that made it feel a little bit more like the game. And if that was their aim, success. But I feel like we were even given a little bit more of a bait and switch, like not just with McKenna Grace, but you talk about throwing Skeet Ulrich in there and Matthew Lillard returning. Obviously, both were known from one of the more popular late 20th century, early 21st century film franchises in Scream. This is putting them together in the same movie for the first time really since that. And you get Skeet Ulrich in the film for one scene, and that's it. Just kind of a throwaway to kind of move the story forward a little bit, and kind of like
with a video game type of plot hole.
100%. And it was so frustrating. I'm like, really? That's all we're getting from this guy? That's all he's going to be in this? Is this? And Matthew Lillard, who I love and is just like a notoriously just great guy, and had such an amazing moment in the first film, just kind of has this little cheesy dream type and I'm going to spoil that just a little bit of like this dream-ish sequence with Vanessa, and tries to be creepy, but it doesn't really hit the mark necessarily. And I don't know, it felt like we were a little bit baited on that too. I'm like, oh, what role are these guys going to play? And we both made kind of like a Scream-esque type joke for like what they could do for Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and just do something absolutely ridiculous like that. And that's not something I think they were hoping for from this, but it really just felt like we were kind of sold a bill of goods on this. And I gotta say, as popular as Blumhouse has been, man, they've had a few misses this year for me that are really kind of putting them, in my opinion, on a bit of a downward trajectory as far as the quality of films that they've put out here recently, and that's kind of a bummer to see, because like you said, the nuts and bolts are there for something really cool and really special that I really feel like they didn't put as much of an effort into moving characters and story forward as much as they could have, instead of just doing a bunch of extra fan service for fans of the game, which was cool, because I know there were people that came out of it like super excited. If you're a fan of the games and just the games, and you only care about the games being incorporated into the movie, like the gaming elements, you'll probably get some enjoyment out of that. But if you're looking for just that to marry well with a really high quality film, I don't think you're gonna be completely satisfied coming out of this, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the hardcore fans of FNAF is going to have probably a better time with this than everybody else, because if you're not worried about plot or story or anything like that, and you're just getting to see the characters that you enjoy, being around in there. But there's just so much convenience of stuff and such odd decisions, especially like you had Wayne Knight as a science teacher who is just straight out of the gate a bully to Abby.
He's terrible.
An absolute jerk, only wants the best of the best for his science fair, and gives Abby no shot at all ever with and again, this is a spoiler, she shows up with one of the animatronics, and he's still an absolute jerk of like, oh, you brought somebody in a suit, like, get out of my face and get out of here and all that. And it was just such I love Wayne Knight. He's been such iconic in Seinfeld and Jurassic Park and so many different roles that he's done throughout the year, and I was waiting to just have a spitter come out and
just get
take
him again.
care of him or something.
Get him again. We both made that.
I was waiting for just because of how they've done things. I was waiting for a Jurassic Park moment to happen within here and stuff, but it was just, it was just so rough. Like I said, the jump scares just felt cheap and lazy for a bit. Like, you saw everything coming.
Yeah, no surprises.
It tries to do creepiness, and it gets a few decently creepy moments. Yeah. But it's more frustrating because you feel like you're almost there, and then right you just miss the mark on everything. And there's also some really silliness over to it too. Like, I know the game franchise can be very campy and silly, but it gets really silly in parts of it as well. And it just feels like a retread of the first one with barely a change. Like you said, you're bringing in Scarlett as kind of being the main thing, and that marionette that it was creepy. Yeah. But the lore behind of like what kept it at bay and what can do it, and even the possessions, like, you're not really diving in, well, how are these possessions possible? You're not really getting that deeper dive into anything other than like, you try to establish Mike and Vanessa's having a relationship, but you don't know if it's a friend, you don't know if it's romantic, because it never really gets
off the ground.
It never gets off the ground, and he refuses to listen to her, doesn't want to do anything. You've just been through something traumatic. It's been a year, even though you're trying to deal with it. Like, you're still treating Abby like, oh yeah, we just had these murderous things happening, and so many kids have died in our town and everything. All right, I'm just going to leave you alone and let you go around town on your own and not keep you away and hide secrets and do it. Just, the plot was just bad. Like, overall, it was just bad. Like, there's good bones there.
Yeah.
They just failed to really capitalize on anything new and interesting. The trailer made it look a lot better and more interesting than it really turned out to be, and that is disappointing. Like, I'm trying to separate between looking at it as just a campy horror film and then looking at something, because it really is trying hard to establish lore and establish a deep and intriguing story. And I just can't ignore that they just failed on doing anything else new and different with it.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, that's just disappointing. But Five Nights at Freddy's 2, unfortunately for me, is very much a miss. You have elements of the game incorporated into the film that were done well, but it missed so much of the point of moving any type of progression in the story forward in a meaningful way that really didn't capture me and captivate me like I was hoping. You get some incorporations, more of jump scares into this, which, if you're a fan of jump scares, you're not going to be wowed by any of these, but they're more incorporated into it as well. But we can't ignore so many of the plot holes and the conveniences and some of the things and just overall bad dialogue in this film. Props to the animatronics team that were putting the animatronics together. Those things looked incredible, and the elements of the game were incorporated fun ways, but just not enough meat on the story moving forward for this to be a real palatable film for me. I'm giving this score a 5.5 out of 10, mainly for the beautifulness of the animatronics and just find the ways they found to cleverly incorporate the gaming elements into the story. But outside of that, it was just a huge miss for me and a real disappointment.
If you're a hardcore fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, you probably will get more enjoyment out of this than, especially if you're a younger hardcore fan of it. But those who are looking for that plot development and to get that story going more, it doesn't really advance anything. Like, we get a setup for a third, we get a few more elements to it, but it definitely feels like a rehash of what we already saw in the first one with just, all right, let's change A, let's change C, let's change F, and then we'll call it a movie. Like, it didn't do enough for the story, for the plot. There's no character development. The jump scares feel lazy and predictable. And anything new they try to do, they just kind of threw it out there and then threw it to the side. I'm giving it a 4, and I still feel like, to me, that's being very generous for it, because I think there are bones that are good to Five Nights at Freddy. Like, it has a very creepy, solid kind of lore of William Afton and the kids and the spiritual possessions and the killer animatronics. And as you said, the Jim Henson Creature Company did a fantastic job with the creatures. They were the highlight, the best thing, just because of how they looked and, you know, how realistic they moved and everything else, doing very practical effects. But the story just failed in almost every way that it could. The dialogue was bad. The acting was off and rough, and just nothing felt together in this film. So yeah, 4 is where I ended on it, because I ended up feeling bored towards the end. Like, I was just I wasn't scared. I wasn't getting any story progression. I didn't really have any characters I was rooting for in this film. Like, everything just made me feel like, okay, why am I here watching this?
Yeah, even the climax of the film was very anticlimactic. Like, by the time you get to the last sequence with the animatronics and stuff, like, it wasn't that well done. I kind of agree with that. I think 5.5 is still pretty generous in my opinion, and it's just probably me giving it a little bit of more respect for throwing the gaming elements into it. But you giving it a 4 puts it in Madam Web territory for you, which is very harsh. Like, that's kind of on the harsh way, but I can see why you got there and like why you really did, because we really wanted for this to be so well done. And I'm seeing people give this like a rating way higher than what we're giving it, and that could speak to more of the hardcore younger FNAF fan base in that, but I can't get there, man. I can't get to that high of a score for it, because there's so much more wrong with this film that really drags down what could have been done. Had they made that, you know, movement forward a little bit and gave their characters some more development and tidied up things a little bit more there, I probably would have been a little more generous with this film. But the fact that there was just none, and you have, you know, Abby is still is this whiny young girl that doesn't really grow in any way, shape, or form in this film. Yeah. She doesn't really get any resolution for her, you know, her attachment to these spirits and everything like that. It's very one note, and it's a little disappointing. And, you know, with Vanessa and Mike, their characters don't really develop any either. It's really hard to give it that much higher of a score than what we gave it. So, you know, it's definitely an interesting case study, because I think you're going to have very wildly swaying one way or another grades on this. Mm-hmm. I did happen to check the Rotten Tomatoes score of this after we had seen it, because I'm notorious for not looking at anything review-wise for a film before we go and see it, just to get my own no bias one way or another perspective on a film before we can. And I could see why it's being hit as hard as it is on the Rotten Tomatoes score, even lower than what we're giving it. Like, I think even we're being more generous than a lot of people are that have been seeing it, but I have seen friends that have seen it before we got to see it even. We're always just like, oh, it's great, you're going to love it, and you're going to do this, and it just very much wasn't the case. And I'm going to go ahead and say sorry to my friend Lance, who I know absolutely loved the film, but we're going to have a lot to talk about this when I see you at work and talk about this, because this film just was not it for me.
Yes, it seems like, between the critic score, they're breaking down plot and story and visuals and kind of what makes a core of a film work, while a lot of the audience scores has been higher. It's just about pure fandom. It's about, well, you gave me Freddy Fazbear, and you gave me Chica, and you gave me all these characters I enjoy, and I got to see him do horror and stuff. But it's also one that it's PG-13, and it's trying to give you horror, but in a safe way. You're not really seeing violence. You're not seeing the murders. You're, everything is kind of like off camera for most of it. You see some of the attacks happen, but when it comes to the point of like, well, we're going to finish off a character, something else, it all happens like off screen. So,
which when done well can work. Because it doesn't have to be in your face and visual. There's ways to have implied horror that can work really well that I just don't think they did well in this either.
Yeah, I just don't think anything they really tried to do. Like, I enjoy the games. I've played them. I've watched, videos of streamers and other people play them, and the enjoyment it can get out of it. As I said, it's most disappointing for me because I feel like there is a good horror franchise that can be done with Five Nights at Freddy with this dark storyline, and that you can give some really good horror elements. But when it feels like it's trying to focus more on the lore than the horror, but it's just so lazy with how it handled the lore in here, then that's why it got such low marks, because it just threw stuff in that really didn't matter. And because there's one character in particular they threw in that you're supposed to feel dramatic and everything else, and it's like, why should I care? Because you set nothing up with them. You did nothing for them. And like you said, if it had some character development and it had some plot development that felt different than the first one, I would have given this a lot, higher score. But as you said, it has felt like Blumhouse has really kind of dropped the ball on sequels lately. Megan 2.0 was an absolute mess.
Yeah, and that's what I was inferring from that too, yeah.
The Black Phone 2 was a very mixed reaction from a lot of people. It felt like the second one went in a similar but very different, almost Freddy type of nature with that, and but it feels like they've really struggled to find what they want with sequels. Megan 2.0 tried to do the Terminator 2 route, and it did not work at all. And this one just felt like it tried to just redo what it did in the first one with barely changing anything, which it just felt like a copy and paste type of a sequel, that it didn't really give us anything new or interesting. We got, 2 new animatronics overall. You got different versions of the animatronics in there.
I think they introduced 3 new characters from the games in this that weren't in the first one, and 2 of them were in there very, very briefly.
But I will say there are some Easter eggs if you look in the corners of things, like when he's in the office and look around. There's some things that you can find in there, which was a neat touch.
Yes.
There are also 2 credit scenes. One is a scene, the other is just audio, but I cringed at the extra credit scene. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to spoil it, but I cringed at the second one because they tried to establish something early on in the movie about what happened at the end of Five Nights at Freddy 1, and then this 2-minute credit scene just threw everything out that they tried to establish with that, and it was just so silly, cringy and silly, and just, I know that they're trying to set up for that to be part of 3, but you just threw away anything that you tried to set up with
I want to peel back the curtain just a little bit, because by the time the movie ends, we don't even look to see if there's end credits most of the times, but when we got to the end, we're like, do we really need to stick through the credits? Because we were both kind of over it at that point, but we saw that you were like, there's at least one mid-credit scene. I didn't see if there was an end one. By the time the mid one was done, I was like, apparently there's an end credit scene, and when we got it and it was just audio, and you looked at me with the most disappointed look on your face, and you were like, that was it.
I mean, it's for the lore and the game fans. It's fun. But just to sit through something that was already not that enjoyable, to have that kind of be the closing thing was like, okay, let's go.
It's just one of those, like, you got up so quick to get out of the. I was like, same, buddy, same.
I'm done.
I totally got it.
But Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is in theaters right now. If you're a fan of the series, go check it out. Form your own opinion. See what you like about it. This one is definitely going to be polarizing because it's really going to depend on what you're wanting to get out of this film. If you're just wanting game stuff, you're wanting Freddy and the animatronic characters that you love, and you don't care about character development and plot development and other stuff like that, you can have a fun time with it. But if you want some sort of development and story and better horror, you're not really getting it with this. But go check it out, form your own opinion, because this one is definitely going to be polarizing, and you could really enjoy it, and great that you do. Like, we're not putting down if anybody enjoys something that we don't like. It just had too many issues to really look past when we're trying to give it the benefit of the doubt. It just had so many issues. But make sure you see it, whether you go in theaters to see it or you watch it at home if you were on the fence about it, because you could end up enjoying it. I think there just has to be some lower expectations.
I got a feeling our comment section for this is going to be very interesting, because you have that hardcore fan base, and I know they're wanting to hear people just rave about this film, and we're going to be the little engine that just kind of crapped all over their movie. But this is going to be interesting to see how people respond to this review in particular, because you're going to be on one side of the fence or the other about this, and I'm really interested to have those conversations. Yeah, please come. If you go see that film and you have a completely different take on it, if you think we're way off base, we don't mind hearing about it. We take negative criticism as well as we do positive, so if you agree with us, awesome. Let's talk about it too. But if you disagree with us, let us know what you enjoyed. What did we miss the mark on? Because, we're just two guys here talking about movies, man. We're just, we have our opinions. Go see it and form your own. Don't take ours as the gospel. You might have a better time of it than we did. But yeah, it was definitely a big disappointment on this one.
Yeah, like, I really wanted to watch it, like, getting the trailers. And, they said they listened to feedback of fans, because the first Five Nights at Freddy had barely any horror aspects to it. Like, you got the dark creepiness. Yeah. But not a lot of horror. You didn't get a whole lot with it, other than having the machines coming down towards faces and the animatronics being creepy, but it was really light on the horror, and fans spoke out like, hey, we need more horror, and they threw in a bunch of jump scares, but I wanted it to be so much better, but that's not where my review, that it didn't live up to my expectations. It was just, it just didn't do anything new or fun or interesting that it could have done, and it's disappointing, because there is great lore and a great story that can be done in horror. Like, horror can have good story and have good characters and plot progression and everything else, and this just missed so many beats and so many marks, and it was disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. Now I want to move us into our second movie review of the week. We have Jay Kelly on Netflix. This is kind of a comedy drama directed by Noah Baumbach. It's starring George Clooney and Adam Sandler. George Clooney here plays the lead, Jay Kelly here, who is this world-famous movie actor who is kind of coming up on the end of his career, kind of the twilight moments of his career, where he's really on the fence back and forth of whether he wants to continue to make films and do the things that have made him an international superstar. And it's come at a very personal cost to him by not being as available for his family. Particularly, the focus on this film is more so on his daughter Daisy, who is getting just graduating high school and kind of going off on this European vacation with her friends, that Jay's like, you know what, I'll just ditch what I've got going on to follow her, to kind of spend some more time with her before, in his words, I lose her forever. But you also have Adam Sandler playing Jay Kelly's agent here, and you kind of go on this journey of self-discovery for Jay, where he's, trying to keep himself in the life of his daughter, while also figuring out what he wants for, what's basically the remaining years of his life, while he reflects on, what he has done and what he wants for his life going forward. And that's kind of the kickoff to the whole movie and what it's about. But what were your thoughts on this when you dove in and started watching it?
No, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I think, of course, George Clooney is a fantastic actor. And it started off a little bit slow when it's trying to build, but then you really get the nuances and what it's trying to do. Like, it's another property like the studio was with Seth Rogen, that's trying to peel back the layers and try to show you different aspects that not everyone sees of being in the movies or being in TV, of just how many people these stars have around them, and how what their decisions do have such a great impact, and just how cutthroat the industry can be, and how much you give up. And it's not just the actors who give up, it's the managers, it's the publicists, it's the lawyers, it's the agents, it's like everybody who has to make like extreme sacrifices. And it is kind of like a midlife crisis or an late life crisis that he's dealing with, that he has this feeling that he's just, was it worth all the sacrifices and stuff I did? And it was really interesting, because you're trying to look at Jay Kelly in a few different ways, and you're trying to it's trying to make you feel sympathetic towards him, but also you feel like he was a very selfish guy who didn't think of anybody but himself, because you get these really interesting, well done flashbacks of where you actually have like Jay Kelly standing in the background, because at first you're not exactly sure what's going on, and then you realize, okay, this is him looking back on his life and his auditions and films and other things that he did, and he's really looking back, and you constantly getting a back and forth. Jay Kelly, where okay, he sees some error of his ways, but then he goes about doing things the same way, or he's just oblivious to a lot of things. And I think it was a really great performance by George Clooney, that you got a lot of depth out of him. Adam Sandler was great as well. Like, a lot of the performances are very much more subtle and laid back, but it's the depth of the hurt and the heartache and the struggle and the stuff that they put themselves through to help a movie star or be a movie star. And you're dealing with, the kids. Like, he's got another kid that barely talks to him, and Jessica, who's gone off to be a teacher and living her own life and just doesn't feel like, I don't need Jay Kelly. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you are. And it deals with a lot of different layers. And I really enjoyed this film in the end. Like, it's one that it really made me think about a lot of things. And it's not perfect, but it made me think about a lot of things that it was trying to say, and that it was trying to kind of reveal about the want and the drive of people to be a star and what it can do, because you also get another aspect of that with Billy Crudup's Timothy and what kind of goes in there, which I was hoping we'd see a little bit more of, because I love Billy. He's a fantastic
amazing
actor who does such incredible stuff. Like, he's been brilliant in The Morning Show, and it's just Big Fish is still one of my favorite Tim Burton films that he was in as well. That was really a hard-hitting, emotional film, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of this. Like, it's a much slower, much more kind of subdued performances, but I think there's a lot of heart and soul and decent message behind it, even though it's not always giving you a clear and cut drive of what you're supposed to feel about Jay Kelly in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point, right? Because this is very clearly a flawed man who is very successful, but you do kind of peel back the curtain on what the cost of that success is, right? So it's kind of satire in theme, while also being dramatic and dealing with some of these harder hitting things, because you do see how it does affect the personal lives of all the people around him. And I do feel like outside of the pacing issue of the film, you get a lot of solid thematic elements in it, because you can feel for Jay, but you're also frustrated with Jay, because you're like, oh, you just got it. You really got it. You might be able to make this way to turn your life around. And then he takes two steps back and reverts back to the things that he's comfortable doing. And that's kind of the whole point of his character in this film, is like, he wants to, but he doesn't know how to, or he's not as willing to as he seems like he is. And he just doesn't have that ability to really push himself forward and make the changes in his life that he needs to, almost until the point where it's too late and he has no choice but to, because of things that happen to him throughout the film, right? So you have, obviously, we can talk about some of the spoilery type stuff for this. Obviously, Timothy is his old acting school buddy, and they dive into that relationship of the resentment that Timothy has for Jay, because he took Jay on this audition and he got the film that broke his career that Timothy thought should have been his role to get, that kind of thing, and just a resentment that he harbored for him, and then kind of blows up in a way that it does in this. It's kind of some of the more dramatic points of this film, as far as like, if there's any kind of stakes in this, is because you have the publicist dealing with, this interaction between the two. The fight that they get into was captured by the valet outside of the place that they were meeting for drinks, and him being a Hollywood actor and famous Hollywood actor, a guy getting into a fight with a guy nobody knows because he wasn't successful. It can get twisted in the media, and in the media will turn it into something that it's not completely necessarily what it is, and it can make him look bad, and it could ruin his career, kind of thing. And you deal with some of those elements too, but you have his team that's behind him, which an extra shout out to Laura Dern, who plays his publicist in this and she was absolutely fantastic.
She's always fantastic.
And what limited time she gets in this film, because she's in it for quite a bit of it, but then like as soon as she exits, she disappears very quickly, and you see these people just kind of leave out of his life. life, and in most of the heavy lifting in this film is done by Adam Sandler and George Clooney. And there's a ton of drama in, but I do want to kind of highlight some of the lightness that's in the film and some of the comedic elements that are in this. Adam Sandler calling everybody puppy in this film was both cringeworthy and funny. Like, just like, because, you know, like one of the stereotypes of an agent is they all have pet nicknames for their clients, but he literally calls everyone puppy in the film, which is creepy and funny at the same time. But also, one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie has nothing to do with George Clooney, and it's the meeting that he has in Italy with Patrick Wilson's character, who was one of his other high-profile acting clients, and just the way that he, spoiler alert, Ben is firing Adam Sandler at like the worst possible time for Adam Sandler's character, who's going through his own drama and things, but just the conversation they have at that restaurant where it's like, I'm the one being upset because I have to give you the news. You're not allowed to be upset about it because it's terrible for me, and this is hard for me to do. And he's like, I need to start making these things for myself. And he's like, well, like, there's a lot of people that do this stuff for you, you know, Ben, who's Patrick Wilson's character. He's like, I do all these things for you, Ben, but there's other people that do this for too. So you're going without all of these people. He's like, no, I'm gonna still have this, and this. I'm just getting rid of you. And just, it was such a silly interaction that they have that was very funny, but also like dramatic at the same time too, because it's literally coming for like the worst possible time for Adam Sandler's character Ron in this film too. But it was just, I don't know why, that scene overall just humored me, because Patrick Wilson gave a phenomenal, goofy, over-the-top actor performance in this too, and it was just a real highlight of the film for me.
Yeah, it's those tongue-in-cheek moments where it's poking fun at itself
Very
and at
much.
Hollywood because of how that satire of how everyone sees agents and how they're, and just how different people, managers and agents and people in Hollywood are kind of two-faced. And that's a big theme in here as well, because you get Adam Sandler calling everybody puppy and saying like, you're the most important and you're this and that, and kind of telling everyone the same thing. But then he calls his family and he's talking to his wife and he's wanting reassurance, and he's trying to be a dad, but he's ignoring his son, and he's leaving when his daughter needs him the most. And it's that two-faced nature of Hollywood that it's really going over all those different layers through all the characters. Like you said, Laura Dern was fantastic, but she didn't get as much. But you get that's also kind of a commentary about how Jay didn't really, she was there and working for him, but he didn't really have much care or idea about her. So when she disappears, you're like, well, she just disappears. And it's like, well, and Jay Kelly doesn't have much of a reaction to it. It's kind of that cutthroat nature of Hollywood that they're touching on. Like, oh, she's no longer around me. Oh, well, like, I've still got Ron, or I've still got this. And there's a lot of satire and just commentary on
for sure,
the film and TV industry. And like I said, George Clooney is just, it's one of my, I wouldn't say it's probably my favorite role of his, but it's one of his better roles that he's done, because you really get to get those emotional layers, and he's supposed to be keeping kind of more guarded and not fully changing, because that's part of the story of that he spent his entire life as an actor, and things are supposed to be temporary, but now he's much older and life has passed him by, and he's wondering that some really, without going too spoilery towards the end, about realizations that all of his favorite memories are movies and scenes that weren't real, that he was acting, and that he doesn't have very, very many big memories that are outside of a film set. Yeah. And that's really, again, more commentary about a lot of stuff. And you also feel like there's a lot of things, especially a special nod that George Clooney said he didn't know was happening, because a lot of this revolves around, they're trying to get Jay going from one movie to another movie set, but he kind of has that breakdown where, he wants to follow his daughter around in this. So, Ron sets up, well, we're going to honor you, and so you can be in Europe, and he's got his whole team tracking his daughter behind his back, and he kind of says that, okay, I'll let you do the honor. Well, we already got Ben set up for the honor. Oh, we can do a double honor. So, like, we're just going to keep doing it, and it kind of goes through to get to that ending of his honoring, and there's a lot of stuff that's towards George Clooney. You're seeing a lot of his actual films and other work in that, but I feel like a lot of this is a reflection of like satire look at George Clooney's career and life in a way. And, you know, he's also channeling a lot of the big classic actors. There's so many different posters and scenes that are recreating classic headshots of, you know, famous actors and everything else. But I think it's a really interesting just study of people and characters and those inside the industry and who pays the bigger price for the cost of fame.
Sure.
And without spoiling the ending, you really do have to be invested in this film to get the most out of it, because the final word spoken in the film is a throwback and a callback to something that happened at the very beginning, but you have to get the nuance of what he said has a much deeper meaning as an actor and as a human being. And like there is such layers in that final sentence that's said that when you really think about it, like, oh, okay, I get that this is happening in his brain, but he just can't stop himself and he's asking for, because I mean, the final line is like, I don't want to spoil it because it's so good, but it's well done if you can really connect it to going back to that first scene and more of what that message meant in that first scene, because it has more layers to it than you expect.
Definitely, if you watch this film, pay attention to the very beginning. Kind of lose yourself in it, because like you said, it is a little bit of a slower pace. It's a little over 2 hours long. I really feel like they could have cut maybe 10 to 15 minutes off of this film, and it would have been even more solid of a movie overall, because I do think it suffers a little bit from some slow pacing issues, but so well done, so well performed all around, and you really get a lot of that satire stuff. I do want to take a brief second to kind of point to the whole George Clooney element in the film, because they even talk about him being an actor from Kentucky, which is where George Clooney goes. Obviously, we live in Kentucky, so we know the connection there. But they have the nod to George Clooney, even like as he's being an actor from Kentucky. Like, it's very George Clooney coded in that way. Anyway, like they kind of lean into that, and I appreciated that little subtle nod to his origins as an actor and growing up not that far from where we live, and it being a kind of a little bit of an element that they interweave throughout the story too, because it's mentioned a few times in it. But I thought it was a really cool nod to, you know, his career, even like you said, the final sequence of the tribute, and you'd see they sneak some of his actual acting in it, while it's also some of very much ode and nods to other classic films, either that they kind of superimposes George Clooney into them, but just some actual stuff from his. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That was a really neat element. I'm glad that was a surprise for him when they were filming it too.
Yeah, he said he had no idea they were doing that the director was doing it. So his reaction
was genuine
of seeing that happen with the audience and stuff. Because he said you're in a full theater of actors and everything else, and you're seeing that happen like in real time, and he had no idea what was happening.
It was a really cool element, a really cool subtle thing for them to do for him, even in this, because to be fair, George Clooney's been around a long time. He is getting up there in age as well. Who knows how long his career is going to go as an actor, so it's kind of apropos to make a film like this for him now. That's very much, you know, was notorious for not getting married for a super long time and being, you know, kind of like one of the most famous eligible bachelors of all time kind of thing before he finally settled down and got married. But it's kind of taking that and turning it on his head, where he was this family guy and had this, you know, broken relationship with his kids. But yeah, I do like all of the elements that they incorporated into this and the themes and everything. This is one that does kind of make you think and let you sit in these scenes and kind of take it in and really lose yourself, whereas Five Nights at Freddy's didn't have all of the character development that we were hoping. There was so much character exposition in this, almost swinging the exact opposite way for us here, where you see him trying to take this one step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing that he goes on this journey for the film. It's just so well done. And like you said, the little nuances and everything here, there's a lot of attention to detail that's very subtle. And just done so well. I got a ton of enjoyment out of this film too.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It wants you to think about all the different layers. Like, if you're not someone who's into something that really requires you to have to kind of piece things together, you may not get as much enjoyment out of it, because like you said, it is a slow burn. It could have used a bit of trimming and stuff with it, and it does require you to really be paying attention to everything that's going on, but also have knowledge of things in Hollywood, of how agents and managers are and publicists are, and how, you know, a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff, but I also think there was also a little bit of a nod to his dad with the dad character in there, because if you know anything about George Clooney, his mom and dad were both also big personalities in Cincinnati and, you know, all around and stuff. So I felt like there was a little bit in there because of how his dad acts towards him, and how his dad kind of felt like he's a bigger deal than his son, and other stuff as well, that you feel like there's a little subtlety of tying into his family history and their fame and everything else with it. But yeah, it was a really solid film. Like, I think George Clooney was just really, it felt like a mock biography of his life.
Yeah,
like,
a little bit, yeah.
It kind of felt like that, which was an interesting way for him to look, because you do get to see Jay in so many different lights. You get to see him on set and how he is an actor and working with things and kind of calling the shots of redoing scenes and all that. But then you get the scenes at the bar with Timothy, where you're getting to see him cut loose a little bit and reminisce about the past and how things are, that maybe he's not remembering things as well as he thought he remembered it. But then you get him like on the train interacting with the regular folk, and you get to see a little different side of that. But then the scenes with his kids, and whether he's there in person or the kind of artistic way of showing a phone call and stuff that happens, like there's a lot of different layers that they show. Like, I can get like at the end that they don't maybe give as big of a resolution as you feel that you should get, but if you get that last line and you tie it to the beginning and you get the meaning of what that really meant of what he said, then you can get that was a really fitting ending to it, because you just kind of get to see who Jay Kelly in the end really was going to be. But there's a lot of layers to it, but I really appreciate what they did with this. And he said Adam Sandler is great. Like, I really love that contrast of it's. You can look back at a review of Happy Gilmore 2 of just how rough I was on it, that I was not a fan of it at all. And he does comedy and goofiness so well, but I don't know why it's still surprising when you get to see him do something that's a little bit more heartfelt and a little more serious. Even though he gets to be goofy at times, he is able to give that different layer and performance. Like, he gives some really solid, serious, even if it's a dramedy type of performance, like he does a really good job in this film.
Yeah, he's really good in this too. It's one of his better, more dramatic roles. I would agree with that completely. Like, you have some really solid performances in this, but like you said, George and Adam do quite a bit of the heavy lifting throughout this film, and for good reason. They're both incredible actors and phenomenal performers, and it was just so well done. I don't have a whole lot outside of the pacing to really nitpick about this film, because they got the message across they want to. It was shot well. The cinematography in it is really good. The dialogue in it is really good as well. Like, it's smart dialogue. It's, so many different fun elements to it. One of my favorite scenes outside of the Patrick Wilson, Adam Sandler scene, my favorite scene with George in it is the scene on the train where he's just talking to the regular people, and you see him, like, him just basically doing a Q&A session on one of the cars, where they were just like, "Oh, you do this," and you just kind of see that charm and that way in his ability to connect with people that are just like the regular people or whatever. But you see him just turn on that charm and be that. It was a really fun scene just to see him interact with people that way, and in a way you don't really normally think of seeing celebrities of that nature interacting with regular folks. Is more often than not we hear about the negative interactions way more than the positive ones, but you get to see that really cool public interaction that he has, where he just turns on the charm and just everybody gets kind of swept up in, oh my God, this famous actor's on the train with us, and he's just like us. He's a regular guy, and he has the snappy comebacks to people, and just it was a really fun interactive scene that I got a lot of enjoyment out of.
Yeah, I think the train is one of my favorite sequences in the film, because you get that, because you're also not sure is that Jay being himself with him, or is it like PR that he's been trained so much in, his career to be able to talk to people and tell them exactly what they want to hear.
Yep.
No, but then you cut to that his daughter's on that train, and he's standing behind the door watching her make out with the guy, and he's just standing there just watching, and then she notices him. He's like, "Oh, hi," and then comes to the door, and then you kind of get to see him fall into being the dad, but he's just not sure, like, oh, did I screw up in following her and doing that? Yep. And then it just goes a complete 180 where he chases down a burglar who stole a purse and stopped the train and running off. Like, it's almost like you started filming a movie in the middle of this sequence on the train.
Really funny.
But then it hits you at the end of that sequence with the robber of, well, not everything is as it appears. Like, this was just kind of a desperate guy who's shown, and you get that. It says, like, there's just so many layers in that train sequence, because you also got Laura Dern and Adam Sandler's character are kind of revealing stuff about their past and everything between them, and you're getting a lot of revelations of them, like, why are we just following this guy around who doesn't give a crap about us, and we just spending our entire lives wrapped around his life, and he couldn't care less about it. Like, that train sequence had so much depth and layers if you really look at everything that happened. So that was a pretty monumental sequence, but it was one of my favorites because of those layers between it all. That, are you really getting a true Jay Kelly in here, or is this the PR actor doing pretty much a sketch? Because, like, a big running theme of this movie is it's easier to pretend to be someone else than it is to try to be yourself.
Right.
And that's a key bit of dialogue and a key message throughout this entire film. It's like it's so much easier just to pretend to be someone else than it is to be yourself.
Yeah, and it's not even just a theme for Jay. It's the theme for all the people around him, too, because you deal with the element of Adam, Ron and Jay are supposed to be like friends, but he's also his agent. And they very much toe that line of, it's like, are we really friends, or are you just somebody that takes 15% off the top and you pretend to care about me kind of thing? Like, is it like, are we actually friends and all this other stuff? And you deal with that relationship element as well, because, while Ron leans more into the, no, we're friends first, but because we're friends, I'm going to take care of you. It does come with a financial cost, but he's very much on that side of it. And then you get Laura Dern, who's completely on the opposite side. Liz is like, I love you, but I don't love you. You know what I mean? Like I care about you, but I'm also going to take my 15% and kind of make sure that, we cover you and keep this gravy train going kind of thing. But yeah, it deals with those thematic elements too. Like, 'cause you're not just dealing with the crisis that Jay's having. Ron's kind of reflecting and looking on his life too. And so is Liz and all of the other people that are around Jay, because not only do you have that, you have a hairstylist who's kind of important for that for a little bit before she has other opportunities. And then you also have, like, his security guard, who was just so funny in this. I don't know why I laughed every time he was on screen, because he's very, very serious, but the one where he tripped running off the train, I was just cackling. I don't know why. That was so funny for me visually, but very well done. And it just, such a good movie, man. This was a pleasant surprise for me, because I was like, yeah, it didn't get a theatrical. It got a very brief theatrical release, even, like,
because it is a Netflix property.
Correct. So once again, with Netflix, they got a very limited run in very select theaters that never came anywhere near us. But with it having that, you just don't know what kind of quality you're going to get. It's still kind of hit or miss. But I was pleasantly surprised by this one. This is one of the better ones I've seen come out in a while, and that was a lot of fun. That was a fun journey that we got to go on in this story that really leaves you thinking. And if you're paying attention and you get the subtle nuances and you're picking it up and you're paying that close attention to the story, you'll have a good time with this one.
Yeah, so Jay Kelly is a really interesting kind of character study. You're looking at the actor, you're trying to look at the man, the father, all the different layers and elements of somebody, but also the craziness of Hollywood, of the huge teams around these people. But it's looking at their lives from different perspectives of what they show to Jay and what Jay shows to others, but also how they are in their personal life, that nothing is really cut and dry in Hollywood, and that there's so much fakeness and so much given up, and it gives some really interesting layers and messages and depths about what we give up for careers and fame and just desire for many different things, and what we're missing out on and what we're losing. And, like, there's a great, interesting story and message behind this. George Clooney gives one of his better performances. He is really great in this, with a really layered performance. Adam Sandler is solid. He gives a really subtle, but you get a little bit of that heart that he is struggling and what he wants to do, but he's also is really easy, like Jay is, to jump right back into the character that he kind of plays instead of the human being outside of it. I thought it was a really smartly done film that really makes you think and go back over all the different things that it tried to say and do, and I think it all worked really well. I'm giving it an 8.5. I think this was a pleasant surprise that it really gave me a lot of enjoyment when I was really able to sit down. I sat down for like 10, 15 minutes afterward just thinking about all the different things it did. And, you know, I am someone who's very interested in the behind the scenes and seeing how things work in Hollywood. I don't exactly want to be a part of all that insanity, but seeing that kind of peeling back the curtain in a positive and negative and just kind of not shying away from showing all the bad and the good at the same time. I thought it was just so really well done.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have too much to add to that, honestly, because I think we're in pretty tight alignment with this. I landed on an 8 as a grade for myself in dealing with this. This is definitely one that does leave you thinking and paying attention, which I think is it's kind of a standard for Noah Baumbach films. Like, he has those elements into a lot of the ways he likes to tell his stories, and you get that here. George Clooney was phenomenal in it. Adam Sandler was really good. Laura Dern was phenomenal in it. Like, really solid performances from some well-known actors, and you get some other subtle, you know, appearances for some people you may recognize as well in this that had kind of minor bit roles in it, but a really solid film overall that, you said, does peel back that curtain on Hollywood a little bit, and you get some of that story from a perspective you don't always get to see, and they did a phenomenal job at it and kind of keeping the satire in it and finding the levity when it's not too dramatic and kind of pulling you back a little bit to kind of be like, okay, you don't need to, it's serious, but we're going to have a little bit of fun with it too. So they kind of toe that line in a really well done way that I think 8 for me is a solid score to where I land on it. It's not perfect. It does suffer from a little bit of pacing issues, especially at the beginning, but once you really jump off into really the adventure when they leave to go to Europe, it really picks up from there and really starts to take off at that point. And a really, really solid film. Definitely, I would agree, one of George Clooney's better roles that he's had in a long time. And who knows, maybe he gets some award consideration for it. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But like we keep coming back to, this is one of those years where there's so many really, really good performances. It's going to be hard to weed some people out. And this one may make the cut, it may not, but it's worthy of at least considering for it, I think. And
absolutely.
In a way that he does such a really, really well done job with this, that I got a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, so Jay Kelly is playing on Netflix right now. Go check this out if you're into this sort of thing. It's not going to be for everybody. It is definitely more, I guess,
it's a niche
on the artistic side, but it's really about peeling back those layers of Hollywood. And if you're not a fan of Hollywood and all the hoopla and stuff that goes on there, you may not get much enjoyment out of it. But if you have at least some interest in it, of a character study and looking at all the different layers of a human being and how they've gone through their life, and if what the sacrifices you do in your life are really worth it, then this is a film that you could have some good enjoyment of, and that'll make you think.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of those elements are good, and it was definitely a nice palate cleanser for this one to kind of end the week after we were a little harsh on Five Nights at Freddy's 2, but
very stark difference between
these two films for sure. Very thematically different, but yeah, the meat and bones were there for something really solid with Five Nights at Freddy's. Maybe they could pull the nose back up when they get into the third one. Who knows? But Jake Kelly's a standalone film, really solid. I'm glad we made the time to watch it and talk about it. It was one that I'm glad I sat through and got a lot of enjoyment out of watching it. It's very much a niche film. It's not going to be for everyone, but if you're into that sort of thing, you'll get some really good performance out of this. If you're looking for a ton of excitement in a movie, this kind of isn't the film for you, but definitely one that makes you think it was a well-told story. I really dug it. It was really good.
Yeah, Jake Kelly's probably one I do plan to revisit at some point, just to look at the nuances and bits of it, because I do like those type of introspective films that kind of really is more about the layers of being a human and being what it means to be this, and like really the cost of fame is really talked about in this, and the parallels to George Clooney's actual life in here, like it just felt really interesting. And yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was just, it was so disappointing because, as I said multiple times and beat over the head, is that there are good bones to this story to have a good film, but yeah, Blumhouse was one that was really coming out of the gate and hitting home run after home run and really doing some really good things. And then when it comes to following up, they've really dropped the ball on getting some solid stories. Like, again, it's a teen horror film. You don't have to have that much depth, but like,
give me something.
It almost feels like a retread of the first one with slight details different. There's not that much difference between the first and second film.
Yeah, and that's leaving us incredibly disappointed, but at least we got Jay Kelly out of it. That was a solid one to follow up on. But we're coming up on a pretty big milestone for us here at the podcast. We're coming up on our 100th episode, which will be next week. We're coming up on almost 2 full years of this podcast. And when we start in 2026, we'll be at the 2-year mark, but this is episode 100. This could have been, had I not taken my vacation to Florida that I think this would have been our 100th, but we got something really fun and special, I think, in store for episode 100.
Yeah, we're going to be checking out Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. So this is the 3rd film in the Knives Out series, which I've really enjoyed. With the Agatha Christie stuff with Death on the Nile and all that stuff, and then you've got, Ryan doing all this stuff with Wake Up or with Knives Out. It's been really fun to be coming back to this genre after so long. Like, this was something that was bigger in 60s, 70s, even maybe into the 80s. But you really haven't had that many murder mysteries coming out. And it's also been really fun to see Daniel Craig doing something a bit different because, he kind of started this with Bond and towards the end of Bond and stuff. Yeah. And it's really interesting to see him playing this kind of over-the-top detective. It's been a really fun series so far, so I'm really looking forward. And this is another thing that it's another Netflix property that's got a very minimal theatrical run, nowhere near us, so I'm looking forward to finally checking out when it drops on Netflix. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I just hope it does well, being the 3rd in the series here.
Yeah, I can't wait. That southern drawl that he tries to do in this is so memorable and unforgettable. But the movies are fun. They're a solid film, and they get big casts for these films. Like, it's just huge names that you get for this. And this one's going to be no different. It's another star-studded cast. It comes out this Friday, December 12th on Netflix. We're excited to check that one. But giving in the theme that it is a trilogy, we're going to be talking about our favorite and really diving a little bit deeper into the greatest trilogies of all time. So get that into your head, some of your favorite trilogies. We're going to be talking about them, what makes a good trilogy, what films that make it to 3 film series that make it to 3 films really stick the landing, which ones don't. We're kind of going to run the gamut and talk about what makes it really good, what makes it really done. Spoiler, Lord of the Rings is going to absolutely be discussed in that because it's the greatest film trilogy of all time. Fight me on that one in the comments if you want to, but we'll be talking about different thematic elements and things like that. It's going to be a really fun conversation to kind of let us nerd out a little bit in our 100th episode and talking about film trilogies that we both love and think that missed the mark. It's going to be a fun discussion.
Yeah, because I think I'm as much looking forward to the ones that we feel like failed because there are some big trilogies out there that could have been even bigger and better than they were, but they just kind of missed the mark with their sequels. It could have been the second one or the third one that really kind of hurt its legacy. So there's several that were in there that really, like, they have one standout film and the other 2 are just don't live up to it. So it's going to be really interesting to run that gambit of our favorites, those that are kind of in the middle, and the ones that really missed the mark, to kind of go through all of that. And it's going to be fun to discuss for our 100th episode there, to really kind of have a more relaxed sit back and just kind of debate and discuss what we feel is good. We may not be on the same page with everything. Our love for Lord of the Rings that he already spoiled here for it, but
it doesn't take a
if you've watched any of the other 99 episodes now, that we have talked deeply about our love for the Lord of the Rings film trilogy and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to talk about all that in our 100th episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for your continued support on this. We are coming up on the 100th episode. Very much looking forward to talking about that next week and looking for, honestly, the next 100 episodes to come after that. So we're not going anywhere anytime soon, but that's going to be a fun one to dive in and talk about for sure.
That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio room on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.